Monday, 23rd September 2024 at State House at Debe under the chairmanship of His Excellency the President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Among other things, we considered and passed. The other consideration that we made was the Minister of Lands, Housing and Urban Development presented the valuation bill, a bill to do with valuation. You have heard of chief government valuing properties. The chief government valuer has been an office located within the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, but now we have teased out that function and we are coming up with a standalone legislation to provide for that office. So the Minister of Lands, Housing and Urban Development presented a valuation bill, which bill is basically to provide for the office of the chief government valuer, because it has been an office but has not been a creation of the law. So this law is providing for the office of the chief government valuer, whose cardinal function will be to undertake statutory valuations. The law also intends to establish an institute of certified valuers of Uganda, as well as the council and the governing body of this council. What basically this means is that this law is going to recognize valuers as special professionals, put in place a body that is going to regulate the function of valuation in Uganda. And this law is going to provide for the membership of the institute, the way other professionals also have bodies that look after them, that regulate their work and their practice. For instance, the medical doctors and health professionals have bodies that look at the work of the medical profession. The engineers have an institute for professional engineers. The lawyers have the Law Society and the Law Council. So this law now is going to create an institute of certified valuers, so that the valuers can be registered and the practice of valuation is properly and legally regulated. So this law will provide for regulation of the practice of valuation, and also it will provide for the professional code of conduct and ethics for certified valuers and practicing valuers, because increasing the valuation is becoming a very important service, and therefore this law is going to be very helpful in ensuring that we streamline that function of valuation. As you know, for instance, the Constitution provides for acquisition of private property. For instance, Article 26 of the Constitution says that Ugandans, citizens of Uganda, have a right to own private property. And that article gives authority to government to compulsorily acquire private property. If you own land, the Constitution authorizes government to compulsorily acquire your land. I'm sure you know that. But that provision of the Constitution has some benchmarks. That one, you, the owner of that property, must be given a fair and adequate compensation. And that compensation should be paid promptly. And it should be paid prior to government acquiring that property. And you, the owner of the property, you have a right to seek court redress in case you are not satisfied. Those are the ingredients of that Article 26 of the Constitution. So when we speak of you, the owner of the private property, having a right to be given a fair and adequate compensation, that means that attracts the function of valuation. Somebody has to value that property. If this was a private property of somebody and the government wants to compulsorily acquire it, then somebody has to come and value this property and say it is worth this amount. And then you, the owner, is then paid. But also what I can add is that in that article, government can't just compulsorily acquire private property for anything. There are also ingredients for why government can compulsorily acquire. For instance, for public health, for security, for public morality, and other ingredients which are in the law. I'm just using this example of that article to just emphasize the importance of valuation. And that's why this law is creating this office of the chief government valuer and attaching functions to that office, and also ensuring that the profession of valuers is regulated properly through legislation, and therefore this law is extremely important. So it was discussed by cabinet and passed, and as you know, the next steps after this stage is for the bill now to be improved by the first parliamentary council to accommodate the comments which are made by cabinet, and thereafter the bill will be tabled in parliament for first reading, and then to go through the processes before it becomes law. The third issue that cabinet considered a policy on business process outsourcing. Business process outsourcing, in simple terms, just refers to a phenomenon where an organization, whether a public office, public entity, or a private entity, can outsource its services to a third party. And somebody gets employed without necessarily physically leaving the location where he or she ordinarily stays. For instance, an organization in Kampala can employ somebody in Karamoja or in West Nile to provide a service, and he or she provides it from Karamoja or West Nile without physically relocating to where he or she has gotten the employment opportunity. And the business process outsourcing can be onshore or offshore. In other words, it can be within the country, but also it can be out of the country. Meaning that an organization in a foreign country, say US, Canada, or Europe, or Asia, can actually employ you to do work there. And you do it from here in Uganda, and you are considered an employee, but definitely it is IT, information technology, that facilitates that kind of ability. So what we presented as a Ministry of ICT and National Guidance is a policy that is going to guide the country on this phenomenon of business process outsourcing. And what has driven us to put in place this policy is that, as one of you correctly said, we have a big segment of our population in Uganda being young people. And the NRM government has also provided education opportunities for our young people, because now we have many universities, many colleges and tertiary institutions that are providing tertiary education to majority of the young people in Uganda. And we are faced with the challenge of ensuring that these young people have access to decent job opportunities. Of course, as a government, we are doing all it takes to create jobs in the public sector, but most importantly in the private sector. But also we are exploring the possibility of creating job opportunities outside Uganda through the framework of business process outsourcing. There are Ugandans who get employment outside and they physically relocate. Like you know, of late we've been getting many Ugandans, young people going to the Middle East for those jobs. But through business process outsourcing, we intend to explore various opportunities outside the country where Ugandans, especially young people, can get employed and they do the work when they are physically present here in Uganda. There are countries like the Philippines, countries like India that have done very well, and we have benchmarked some of those experiences, and therefore this policy will help us address that challenge of employment opportunities for our young people. The major objectives of this policy are to facilitate public and private sector process re-engineering, to ensure minimum operational costs for BPOs, to enhance access to markets for BPO operators, to enhance skilled labor for BPO, and to provide adequate private and public infrastructure support for the BPO ecosystem. As we notice, for the business process outsourcing to be successful, we have to work on the digital infrastructure into the country. Because if you are employed as an auditor, for instance, in a European firm, maybe in Estonia or Romania or UK, it means you will do the auditing from here, and that has to be facilitated by digital communication. So things like the cost of internet must be affordable, the infrastructure must be in place, you must be able to afford the computers, the digital devices. So as we go out to implement this policy, we are implementing it in a broader government framework of ensuring that we accelerate the digital transformation agenda. And therefore this policy was presented by myself, the Minister of ICT, and it was supported and passed by the Cabinet.